finally wrapping up chapter on products and services as an international marketer. We're going to cover branding, the importance of understanding your brand, the changes in definitions on how branding concepts have evolved over the last few decades, as well as core competencies. Branding is by far one of my most passionate sections of international marketing, as we tend to think as an international marketer, a brand is something more simplified, but the reality is marketers that are really aware of their brand are aware of their constraints of the brand itself or the control they have over the brand. So we are left usually with the definition that a brand is the name, term, design, symbol, or any other feature that identifies one seller's good or service and is distinct from other sellers. We think of the design. We know it's a Nike shoe versus an Adidas shoe. We know it's a Chanel versus a Louis Vuitton. Those types of things are very basic and in a legal sense are okay. But a marketing definition, we try to think of features, and then that brand is creatable and manageable, because we think of all the extras. How many commercials have you seen for cable or internet and phone services combined, as we look at bundling and features in itself as a basic sense? But marketing is becoming more and more different, and we see that marketing definition is that we look at marketing as the individual's cognitive concepts. So it's not just this design or term or feature, it's what they believe in the brand, the images and its beliefs, the value derived from its social meaning. When somebody has an MCM bag versus a Mont Blanc bag or a belt, you see two very different values that is derived different from their social groups. So we are used to customers as symbols in a social interaction. This does not sound anything like we are used to understanding in your typical traditional class of branding. We think of something that's controllable, we can manage it, but reality is these concepts and images or beliefs, we have a lot we can influence, but do we really have control over it? And that's where the next definition that I really find fascinating comes into play. Brands are a complex social phenomena where there are three closely interrelated concepts: the brand's interest groups, the brand meaning, the brand manifestation. These are people and organizations that are interested in this brand. They're subject to this continual ongoing process of discourse. Brands don't just happen. They're like culture in a sense. They emerge. Its meaning emerges over time through this complex process of communication, as any other typical communication, where there's a sender, a receiver, and there's a message, and something happens in between. The same is happening here. We're giving out our message, but how it's being perceived and the concepts that are taken from it changes, and what emerges is the brand itself. We don't have anything we really control in that section. We hope for the best, but the social construct is its own, and it's up to us to be responsible international marketers in any market we deal with, and any marketer for that matter, to understand that this social construct has a lot of responsibility and a lot of accountability. So be careful with your brand, because it, just like a Yelp review, it can take you years to build your brand, but it can take minutes to destroy your reputation. So this complex phenomena proves that. In a very typical communication style, you see brand meaning, brand manifestation, brand interest group. Brand interest group is anybody involved with the brand, not just the buyers and consumers of the products or services themselves. It is also the people interested or involved. How many times you see people wear Lamborghini shirts but cannot afford a Lamborghini, for example? These are people interested in the brand, and they add value to it as well. So it's important to understand everybody you're involved with. So that's a brand. And a brand, I want you to always be aware of the first things. It's a social construct. It's a meaning emerges over time, and that it's not completely controllable. We can give out what we want and influence a lot, but we do not have full control over the groupthink of a brand. Another important concept, I think that is challenging from academic standpoint, and as well as a lot of other business concepts, is the core competency. And I'll explain that in a second. A core competency it's important to understand what you're good at. What does it mean to be in a core competency or to have a core competency? And a lot of people think, oh, it's just something I have an advantage over the others. You should really understand that core competencies are resources and capabilities that are valuable, rare, difficult to imitate by others, not very substitutable, and can be transferable to different markets. How do we know this? When I pick up an iPhone or a Porsche, I know exactly what it is because it's valuable. Others don't have it. It's difficult for others to make, and not many people want to substitute, an Audi or a Mercedes. We know what we want. We want the best. And it's transferable to different markets. You will find that a Mercedes is as very valuable in Germany as it is in the United States, as it is in Brazil, as it is in China. So when you look at your core competency, when you want to expand your operations or you want to look into new product lines, you really should know what your brand is and what your core competency is. Reason being is if you start stretching, or say you're merging into other firms and you're acquiring other firms, you don't want to buy into firms that won't add value to your core competency. Reason why this has become challenging as a traditional concept is we used to think that the idea of major conglomerates like Unilever and Procter & Gamble were mergers that weren't really sensible. And then you see BMW buy a lot of tech companies that weren't really car related or auto related. And that never turned out very successful mergers, so to speak. But when you look at mergers and acquisitions today, it's hard to make that same argument. When you see companies like Amazon are providing merchant services through Amazon Prime, then they have Prime Video, and they also provide web services and data services that are none of which very relatable in a very initial perception as a core competency. So what is Amazon's brand? What is their core competency when they're doing so many different activities that seem unrelated to one another? And that's what I find fascinating. Google, for example, is kind of the same. They have a Google car, and then they're trying to also keep Google Maps, and then YouTube, and they're keeping Google Search. All these have to be relatable, and you have to know what those are for you to be successful in knowing your business and what you're special at, what's your niche, so to speak. So we're always stuck with, what is your core competency? What is your company's core competency? Finally, I want to talk about something about global branding. Global brands can emerge. We have seen that, where feelings and concepts, socially constructed, of course, seem to kind of homogenize across markets. The global brands we're talking about is the Mercedes, is the Coca-Cola, is some of the brands in Procter & Gamble and Unilever. They're the most iconic brands you'll see anywhere in the world. One of the most iconic to that one would be Nike, of course, and their swoosh. So worldwide, your brands can become household names. And how you do that, when I think of Nike or I think of Coca-Cola, the country of origin effect, for example, becomes less innate or tied to the brand. We think of Coca-Cola and what Coca-Cola is. So that is the power of a brand really becoming global. It ascends from its origin, country of origin effect even. Top brands, I don't know what years this are, but I usually have in my slides, I have to see where, I always love these slides. When I look at top brands from when I first saw the best brands and their values, you could check it out. I'll share it in our module. The top brands used to be Coca-Cola, used to be Microsoft and Google, and today it is flipped on its head with the emergence of new brands in 2018, really going to the top. And then because of the pandemic, even other major shifts have happened. As what you don't see here, of course, is a major leader, Amazon, Walmart. All of these companies have made major strides in their branding. And so I'll share those major brand changes in another slide deck or links later. You'll find it very fascinating how it's changed. Brands in international markets, not all companies can have a global brand. It's really what you strategically place yourself in, because the social constructs may not homogenize, and that's okay. And when somebody sees that brand, they will see it differently than the eyes of a home market. And you need to be aware of that. You can't thrust or think it will happen. Maybe you will be a global brand. Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll be global, act global. Think global, act local. And that's where you will generally find yourself most likely in for the smaller firms. It's not cheap to protect your brand. Cannot stress that enough. Like I said, it could take years and decades to create your reputation, but it could take seconds to destroy it. So be careful with what you're doing. National brands or country-specific brands have their own place. These are things like Ford. I know Ford when I see it. It's an American brand. Toyota, a Japanese brand. When I see Facebook, I think of an American brand. So the concepts become very nationalized. Certain wines or cheeses from France, Italy, or Spain or Argentina, and California all stick out as their own. So the country of origin effect is huge. The influence of the country of manufacture or assembly or design has a perception. People know Apple products are designed in California. It's an American icon, but it's a global brand. And it does have, even though it has some ethnocentrism attached to it. So you don't want to be caught up in politicization of your brand, where, for example, when people are burning a flag, they're boycotting your product. You don't usually see that with truly global brands. Private brands are your way to potentially be in a market where you cannot really thrive on your own. You need to be attached to another brand. So private brands are a great way to have a private label so you can be a part of another brand and make sales. In some cases you can stand alone, in some cases you never can. You'll be surprised that manufacturers of certain brands actually have private labels and brand names that stand alone because they like the market share. They're not cannibalistic in some ways. So that's important to know. Private brands is another great way to get into a market, being attached to another local brand without being truly invested or being associated with that country of origin effect. So lots of options. Just remember the core competency, the concepts have evolved when considering companies like Amazon, and really understand that a real brand is something much more than what you just think about. Go around and look at brands you're used to and what comes to mind. So, and you'll start seeing brands from hopefully a different perspective. And I hope you enjoyed that.